Welcome to a series of presentations intended to provide you with guidance about the Veterinary Medicines Digital Service. This particular presentation focuses on the licensing aspect of the service. So once you've signed in to use the service, you'll be taken to this home page where you can click on the link to go into the licensing part of the service. So this is the home page of the licensing part of the service. You will see a list of all the current marketing authorisations that you currently hold and animal test certificates. So at the bottom of this slide you can see the headings authorisation number and product name. We are currently developing this page to include animal test certificates, and there'll be a new column that says auth type. So in this list you'll see a list of all your current and suspended marketing authorisations, but also a list of all the ATCs that you hold, and that will be identified in the new auth type column. From here you can start an application. You can also see stuff that you've already started and saved, so incomplete MA applications, but also stuff you've recently submitted to the VMD, and we'll talk about those other two tabs later, but from here we're going to start an application. So once you click on the button to start an application, you'll be taken to this page. The first three options involve online application form, so you can complete the form online, then upload a dossier or any documentation in support for that application and send it to the VMD. So that's for new MAs, to renew an MA or to vary an MA. For everything else, there's the submit other document types, and this is where it's an upload function where you can send us information in support of other licensing activities. For lots of these activities there are application forms available, but they're not yet online application forms, so they are available on gov.uk. Now I've included a link at the bottom of this page that takes you to where those forms are published. So I'm going to talk to you about different application flows and give you examples, say, of a UMA application flow, a variation, etc. However, if you don't want to listen to the whole of this presentation, on this slide I've told you where each of those flows start, so you can skip to the flow that you are particularly interested in. So let's start with the bottom option of that list, which is submitting other document types. So this is where we don't have an online application form available for you just yet. So from the list of options, you'll select Submit Other Document Types, and you'll be given a list of all the different submission types that you can send us under this heading. For the purpose of this exercise, I've chosen ATC New. Once you've selected your submission type, you'll be taken to this page where you can provide us with any information that you want to tell us about, anything you think will be useful. If you are submitting some documents in support of a current application procedure, for example, mock-ups or company response, please include the application number that your submission relates to. Otherwise, you can leave this field blank. Then you'll be asked to provide us with some details of the application contact. So that's the person that the VMD can get in touch with if we have a problem or any questions about your submission. So here, please just provide the full name, the telephone number and the email address of the person who's acting as the application contact. And this is where you can upload your documents. So this could be your application form plus any other supporting documentation. It could be if you're submitting mock-ups as part of a current application process, you can submit those and upload those here. Once you've done that, it will take you to an application summary page, which simply summarises the information you provided to us. Here you'll also be able to change any of that information if you've made a mistake. So now your application has been submitted, and this is the page that you'll see. You'll be given a unique reference number that you should use in any communication with the VMD about your submission. If you have sent us a new application, so that's, for example, in relation to an ATC, a homeopathic registration or autogenous vaccine, once we've received your application, we'll process it in line with normal application procedures and we'll log onto our in-house system. Once that's done, we'll assign a unique application number to your submission. So once you've been notified of that unique application number, that is the number you should use in all future communication with the VMD about your application. Okay, so let's talk about applications for new marketing authorisations. So here you'll click on the New Marketing Authorisation button, which starts the application process. The first piece of information you need to provide us is with the proposed name of the product for which you're applying to get an authorisation for. You can include more than one product name where you are applying to get an MA or MAs for a product family. So here in this example, I'm applying to get MAs for a product called Natalie Test Flea Drops 50mg and Natalie Test Flea Drops 25mg. So on this page, you're able to provide us with a reference number. This is a reference number that you want to use. This is your company reference number that you want us to use in communication with you. It's optional. We also ask you to identify the type of product included in your application. So that is it a pharmaceutical product? Is it an immunological product, a biological product, or biopharmaceutical? For immunological and biological products, they'll be treated in exactly the same way. You need to provide exactly the same information. This is just useful for us to know. So in this example, I have clicked a pharmaceutical product. Then we get a list of the legal basis of the application. Now, this list will differ depending on what type of product you've chosen. So the options in the list for a pharmaceutical product may differ slightly to that's available for an immunological or biological product. So in this example, I have clicked a full legal base, which is I'm providing all the information myself. If you look down the list, there are other legal bases. So for example, you have informed consent, informally known as a copycat, where you'll be cross-referring to another product status. So this tells us what we're expecting to receive from you in support of your application. So every time you complete a section of the application form, it will take you to an application summary. So here, I've now completed the application details and it tells me it's completed. So now I'll click on product details and start to fill in that information. The first piece of information the form asks me for is about the substances that are included in the application and the species. So from here, I can select from a drop-down list. So by free typing, starting to type a few of the letters, it will provide me with a list and I can select from that list. I can choose 1, 2, 3, as many active substances as I want to. I can also then list and do exactly the same thing with the excipients. If it's a biological or immunological product, I'd also be asked about antigens, etc. But obviously, for this example, it's a pharmaceutical product. I can then select the target species indicated for my product. Again, I can pick more than one. For this example, I've chosen cattle. So now I need to identify the route or routes of administration for the species. So I've only chosen one species for this application, so I can enter in 1, 2, 3 routes of administration for cattle. I've chosen just one here. If I'd chosen more than one species, once I press continue for this species, it'll then take me on to another page asking me to enter the same information for the other species included in the application. Then I'll be asked about product details to do with the pack type or types. This is a free text field, so I just need to include all the information that's been asked for. For this example, I've entered 2 different pack types. As it's an example, they are slightly silly examples, but that's what I've put in. So here it asks me if any of the species included in my application is actually a food producing species. Obviously, for this example, I chose cattle and that is a food producing species, so here I click yes. Then it takes you to another page asking me whether or not all the substances, excipients, etc. have the right and appropriate MRL set for them. If I said yes, obviously we'd move on. However, here I've chosen to say no. So now it's asking me to tell them what I'm going to do about obtaining the appropriate MRLs. Because obviously if I don't have the appropriate MRLs, this application is not going to get very far. So here I've simply said that an application to obtain the appropriate MRLs will be submitted within the next 2 weeks. And this means the VMD now knows to expect an application within the next 2 weeks and can chase me, perhaps if they don't receive anything. So now I've completed the product details section, so it's taken me back to the application summary and it shows me that that section is completed. So I'm going to click on legal distribution. And here it's just a one page whereby I need to choose the proposed legal distribution category for my product. Here I've chosen POM VPS. So I've completed the legal distribution section of the application form and it's taken me back to the application summary. So now I'm going to move on to contacts. So the first contact piece of information is actually automatically filled in for me and it's just confirming the name and address of the proposed MA holder. Now this is automatically populated because obviously you are submitting this form from your company account. So it recognises the company account from which this application is being made, so therefore it auto-populates that on your behalf. So now I just need to include some other contact information. The first piece of information is the application contact details. So this is the person within the company who's going to be the VMD's contact throughout that application process. So here you just need to include their full name, their telephone number and their email address. And then we move on to QPPV, so that's the qualified person for pharmacovigilance. So here you need to provide the name, telephone number and email address of that person. So moving along on in the contact section, I now need to provide the name of the person who's responsible for reporting defects and instigating recalls. So again, I just need to include the full name, telephone number and email address of that person. Then we move on to named distributors. And here it says, is the proposed MA holder the named distributor? Because if the answer is yes, there isn't any other named distributor. If you click yes, it automatically recognises who the named distributor is. If the answer is no, you'll then move on to another page where it asks you to provide the details of any proposed named distributors. So on the previous slide, I said no, the MA holder is not the named distributor, so therefore it's asking me to provide details of who the named distributor or distributors are. So here I just provide the company name and the business address. So I add this address. Obviously I can add more than one named distributor. So we've completed the contact section of the application form, so it's taken me back to the application summary and it's showing me which sections I've now completed. So now I'll move on to finance details. Now finance details, this is where I can provide information about a purchase order number. Again, this is optional. Some companies do have purchase order numbers and they like to provide the VMD with that information, so we can include that on any invoice that we send you. Clearly other companies don't, so this field is optional. Then it's asking you to provide an email address of where you'd like us to send the invoice. We send invoices electronically now via email, so this piece of information is incredibly important. I haven't shown you the application summary page upon completion of the finance details, as I think you're probably getting used to it now. So obviously we've completed the finance information and we've moved on to supporting documents. Now here we provide a list of the documents, not everything, but it's a reminder about some pertinent information that you should provide with your application. So it's like a checklist for you to use to make sure you have provided everything that you should be providing. Obviously the VMD will be checking that as part of our validation process. If there's a piece of information that we would normally expect to receive from you, but you're not providing it, please provide a comment in the admitted documents section. So this is telling us why something is missing when we're expecting to receive it. So for this example, I've just said, I haven't included an EU table of human and animal origin because it doesn't apply to this application. Now I could be right and I could be wrong, but I'm telling the VMD why I'm not providing something. There's also an opportunity on this page to provide any other information that you want to provide us with. So here I've put that it was agreed with someone at the VMD that a reduced fee would apply. So it's anything you think we need to know that is pertinent to this application process. Again, this is optional, so you can always leave it blank. So we've completed the supporting document. So now you can see on the application summary page all the sections that we have completed. So we'll move on to uploading the document. So that's the form now completed. So here, this is where you would upload your dossier and any other documents you want to send us. So I've already uploaded a file and I've gone back in because I was thinking of changing the file, but now I've decided just to continue with the file that I've already uploaded, but I can change it if I want to. Right, so I've uploaded my documents, so I'm back to the application summary page and all of those sections have been completed, so we're almost at the finish line. So before I submit the application, I'm given the opportunity to check my answers. So on the right hand side of the slide, you'll see a list of all the sections that I've completed, and that little plus sign at the end of each row allows me to go back into that section and amend any information that I want to. So before I submit my application, I have to click on this button to agree and submit the application, saying that I recognise what this declaration is and that I'm confirming that the information I've provided is correct at the time of submission. So once I've done that, my application is submitted and I'll get this page on the right hand side of the slide to say your application is being submitted and this is your reference number. So this is the reference number that you should use to communicate with the VMD about this submission. Now, this reference number is simply for use from the time that you submit it to the time that you hear back from the VMD, because your application now will be processed in line with normal application procedures. So the VMD will process it and enter your application onto one of our in-house databases. Once it's entered onto one of our in-house databases, it will be assigned a unique application number and you'll be informed of that. As soon as you're given a unique application number for your application, that is the number you should use in all communication from that point onwards. So once your application has been submitted, you'll receive an email just to confirm the application has been received and it will quote the reference number that you've been given. So if we go back to the licensing homepage, you'll see that I've clicked on recent submissions, and you'll see in recent submissions that my application for new MA for Natalie Test Flea Drops has been submitted and on the date it was submitted. So in this tab I can see and access all the stuff that I've sent to the VMD. I'm also able to download a copy of the application. So the online application form, I can now download it in PDF format just so that I've got a record as a company and an applicant of what I sent to the VMD. I can also edit and resubmit this application. So it could be that once the VMD's received it and they've gone through the validation process, maybe something's missing or something's not quite right. So I might get some communication from the VMD asking me to change something or send something else. So I can actually go back into the original submission and now update it and resend it to the VMD. On the right hand side, during like a new MA application, so with any online application form, I may not want to complete it in one sitting, so I might get halfway through and decide to save and exit, which I can do at any point during an online application. In those situations, that application will be saved to the Incomplete Applications tab. So here I've done a few test ones. You can see those fantastic product names that I've created. So I've got halfway through an application and I thought, oh, I'll come back to this later. So now I want to go back in and resume it, and I can do it from this tab. So just to finish off the new MA application process, we did speak about legal base earlier on, and we spoke about, I gave the example of informed consent, a copycat, where I may reference another product as part of my application because I want the VMD to look at the data that's been provided on behalf of another product. So in certain legal bases, so for example, informed consent, generics, generic hybrids, MAPIs, extensions, etc., you will be referencing another product. So when you do the application form, in that application flow, you'll be asked to provide the name or names and authorization numbers of any products you are referencing that is cross-referring to in your application. So for this part of the presentation, we're going to focus on applications to renew a marketing authorization. So once I click on the button Start an Application, I get taken to a list of options that are available to me. Here I'm going to click on Renew a Marketing Authorization. The first page that appears on the right hand side of this slide is a list of all the sections that I'll be expected to complete. So here for this example I'm going to click Select Products to be Renewed. So now I need to select the products that I want to include in this application. So I can include more than one product. So if there's a family of products, I can include more than one product. So in this example, I've chosen 3 products, all called Paw and Nose Balm, and it's different strengths of the same product. Now I can select those from a drop-down list because obviously in my account knows the MAs that my company holds. So it will show me all the MAs that my company holds, so I can simply select the MAs to be included rather than free typing that information. At the bottom of this page, I'm also able to provide a reference number that my company wants to use in our communication. Again, this is just an optional feature. So on the right hand side, it shows you, we go back to the kind of application summary page, and it shows you that I've completed the Select Products to be Renewed section of the application, and it shows you the products that I've selected. So now I'll move on to supporting documents. So this page lists all the kind of supporting documents that I would expect to see in support of a renewal application. Doesn't include everything, these are just the pertinent documents. So this is provided to applicants as a kind of reminder of the information they should be providing with their application. So you can use it as a checklist, but obviously the VMD will be checking what's been provided during the validation process. If you aren't submitting a document that we would normally expect to receive, please tell us why in the Admitted Documents field. And if there's any other information you want to tell us, please provide that in the Other Information field. Right, so I've completed the supporting documents section. I'm back to the application summary page, so now I'm going to go to upload your documents. So here, this is where I can upload my dossier or any supporting documents that I'm providing with my application. So I simply choose a file and I upload it. So it takes me back to the application summary page, and I can see that I've completed 3 sections already. So now I'm going to move on to application contact information. So when I click on that, it takes me to the page on the right hand side of the slide where I simply need to provide details of the person that's going to be the VMD's contact throughout the application process. So please provide the name and email address of the person that's going to act as the application contact on your behalf, the company's behalf. I can also provide some financial information here. So if I want to include a purchase order number, which you want the VMD or the company wants the VMD to include in its invoices, I can add that here, but it's an optional field. I also need to include the email address of where I want the invoice to be sent to. So now I'm returning back to the application summary page on the left hand side of the slide. So I've completed all of those sections. So the renewal application form is relatively short, which is really good. So now I've done that, I have the opportunity to check all my answers before submitting the application. So on the right hand side of this slide, it lists all the information that I provided. It also allows me to go back into different sections to change any of the information that I want to before I actually submit the application. So before I submit the application, I simply have to complete the declaration, which is confirming that the information I've provided is correct at the time of submission. Once I've done that, my application is submitted and it's whizzing its way through to the VMD. And I've shown this page which says my application has been submitted, and it provides me with a reference number. So this is the reference number that you should use in any communication with the VMD until you hear from the VMD again. And what I mean by this is once the VMD has received your application, it will start processing it in line with normal application procedures. And we will be booking your application onto one of our in-house systems and assigning a unique application number to your application. We will then tell you what that application number is. Once you have received that information from the VMD, the application number is the number you should use in all your communication with the VMD throughout that application process. So this number here becomes redundant. So as soon as you get your application number, this reference number becomes redundant. So once I've submitted my application to the VMD, I will receive an email telling me that my application has been received, confirming what the reference number is, and providing me with the link so I can go back in and look at the application if I want to. So for this part of the presentation, we're going to focus on applications to vary a marketing authorization. So once you click on Start an Application, you'll be taken to the list of options available to you. So for here, I'm going to click on Vary a Marketing Authorization. Now the first screen I will see is about procedure type, and here I need to identify the procedure type that I'm applying for, whether it's a single variation, whether I'm applying for a group of type 1A changes, whether I'm applying for a group of type 1B and or type 2 changes. So here you have to have at least a type 1B or a type 2 change included in that group, or whether or not it's a work share variation. It's at this point I would encourage people to read the guidance available on gov.uk about variations, because it provides more information and more background to what the procedure types are. So before we start doing an example of a variation, let's talk about procedure types in more detail. So here I've clicked on single. If I click on single, then I need to select a procedure option available to me. So that is, I'm applying to make one change to one product, or I'm applying to make one change to several related products. So where you have a family of products, so the different strengths of a family of products. So that would be classed as a single variation. So for this procedure type, I've chosen a group of type 1A changes, and it will show me again now the options available to me under this procedure type. So for here, I could be making several changes to one product. All the changes are type 1A. I could be making one type 1A change to several unrelated products. And the word unrelated is very important here. These products don't have to be part of the same family. They could be completely different products. Or I could be making several changes to several unrelated products. Okay, so all the changes will be type 1A changes. I cannot include type 1B or type 2, and the products do not have to be related in order to be part of this procedure type. For this procedure type, I've chosen group of type 1B or type 2 changes, and the procedure options available to me are several changes to one product, or several changes to several related products. Now the word related is very important here. The products included in a type 1B or type 2 lead grouped variation have to be part of the same family. So this is the difference between this group of variations compared to a group of type 1A changes. Okay, so for a group of type 1B and type 2, you have to have at least one type 1B change or one type 2 change. You can also include type 1A changes here if you want to. Here we talk about a type 1B lead grouped variation or a type 2 led grouped variation, and that is the highest level of change. So a type 1b is trounced, as it were, by type 2. So if you include a type 2 change in this grouped procedure, it will be known as a type 2 led grouped variation. If the highest ranking change is a type 1b, it will be known as a type 1b led grouped variation. And then we move on to work share. And if I click on this procedure type, these are the options that I'm presented with. So that's one change to several unrelated products, or several changes to several unrelated products. And the word unrelated is important here. The products do not have to be part of the same family, but for a work share, the changes included tend to be your type 2 and your type 1b. Okay, but mostly your type 2 changes. You can include type 1bs, but you can also include a type 1a if it's consequential in that application. But you can't have a work share that only involves type 1a changes. Okay, so the important aspect here is that you can make one or several changes to several products that are unrelated. There are so many different scenarios when it comes to variation applications. There's so many different options. I'm not going to work my way through every single one, but I'm going to give you an example of a variation flow. So for this example, I'm going to choose the procedure type of a group of type 1b and type 2 changes. And in the options available to me, I'm going to apply to make several changes to several related products. Now, the next thing it asks me to do is to actually say what products are included in this application. Because this system knows what MAs belong to me as a company, because that's available in my account information, it will provide a drop-down list where I can select the products that I want to include in my application. So for this example, I've chosen, and obviously because it's a group of 1b and type 2 changes, the products have to be related. I can't include products that aren't related. So for here, I've chosen the family of port and nose balm products. If for any reason I'm making an application, not in this scenario, but if I'm making an application and a product isn't listed, I can click on this link here below the list of products, enter details of products not listed, and then I'm able to actually enter manually information about a product that isn't available in my list. So if you look to the right hand side of this slide, I've entered a name of the product, Natalie Test Reflux 100 millilitres, and I've entered the product's UK authorization number. This scenario is quite rare, and it's normally if you've got a change of legal entity happening. So for example, if I'm a company that is selling a product to another company, if the buying company applies for the change of legal entity variation, the product won't yet appear in its list of MAs because they haven't transferred over the ownership of that MA yet. So it's that kind of scenario whereby you may need to include a product that you don't yet own in a variation application, and this gives you the option to do that. So once I've included all the products I want to include in my application, it'll appear in a list and I can remove them, add to it, etc. So now I need to select the variations and changes I want to make to the products included in my application. On this page, you can select from the list of common variations, and we did some analysis to see what the most used variation changes were that people were submitting. So you can select from this list, or you can select by starting to type in the variation code or name, and a drop-down list will appear. Now, this drop-down list is in line with the classification guideline, and the format of the codes and names are in line with that document. Here I've chosen AZ other variation. Now, because I've chosen an AZ other variation category, this is like an unforeseen variation, one that hasn't been determined yet. So it's asking me to say what type of change this particular variation will be. So is it going to be submitted as a type 1A, a type 1B, or a type 2? And for this scenario, I've clicked type 1B. Now, because it's an other variation, so it's an unforeseen variation, it's going to ask me, have I agreed the submission of this change with the VMD prior to submitting the application, because that's what you should be doing. So this is where the change hasn't been included in the classification guidelines, so it's a new change, perhaps no one's actually asked to be made before. So I should be having a conversation with the VMD prior to submission to say, hi, I want to submit this particular change, this is the reason, there's no classification for it yet, are you happy for me to submit it under this category and as a type 1B? So here you need to select yes. If you select no, then you'll be asked to contact the VMD prior to submitting the actual application. So now I need to say what the actual proposed change is. So here I need to say what the current situation is and what the future situation I want it to be. So here I've chosen a silly example because it is just an example. So I've said the current situation is the font I'm using on my labels is currently Arial, and I want it to be Gothic. Now that isn't a change in the classification guideline, which is why it's an unforeseen variation. Because at the beginning of this application process I said that I was submitting an application that would include several changes to several products, the form knows that I want to submit more than one change, so automatically now it's going to ask me to select my second variation. So here I've selected an A.1, which is a change in the name and or address of the MA holder, same legal entity. Because the second change is a type 1A, the system already knows it's a type 1A. There's no option for it to be a type 1B or type 2, so it knows it's a type 1A. So it doesn't ask me to select the type of change because it already knows it. Because it's a type 1A, it's asking me now to put in the implementation date, which is associated with the type 1A changes. So i.e. the date that I did implement it or the date that I plan on implementing it on, and also allows me to add any other comments that I want to say. It then asks me to again describe the proposed change. So what is the current situation and what is the future situation? So here I've just put in square brackets that I need to state who the current MA holder, what the current MA holder address is, and what I want the current MA holder address to be. So now it gives me a summary of what I've put into the form already. So it says the procedure type that I'm looking to put an application in for, so a group of type 1B and type 2 changes. It's saying that I've opted for the fact I'm making several changes to several related products, and then it shows me what products I've actually included. Again, I'm allowed to make changes from this screen, so I can go back in and make changes if I want to. And then it shows me that I've selected two variation changes at the moment, so another variation and a change in the name and address of the marketing authorization. So from here, if I'm happy with all of that, I can press continue. Once I press continue, it gives me the option to add another variation. So I've said I want to make several changes. It could be I want to make only two. It could be that I want to make 3, 4, 5, 6. So every time, if I click yes here, it will go through the same flow, asking me to set the variation category, maybe asking me for additional information, asking me to say what the current situation is and the proposed situation is. So I can go through that loop as many times as I need to. However, for the purpose of this example, I've decided that 2 changes is enough, so I've put no. Now we go to the supporting documents part of the form. So this is listing some of the documents that I should or may need to include with my application. Again, this isn't a list of everything that you should be including, it's just a list of those pertinent documents that we want to remind you about. So you can use this as a checklist. Now, if for any reason you're not submitting a document that we would expect you to submit in support of your application, please write a comment in the omitted documents field, just telling us why you're not submitting it. If there's any other information that you want to tell us about or let us know, and then please include that in the other information field. Okay, so now it's time for you to upload documents in support of your application. There may be a scenario whereby actually it's only the form you're submitting, there isn't any other documentation that you need to upload or send us. In this case, just simply click on the Continue Without Uploading a File button. If there is other documentation you need to upload in support of your application, please do so here. Once you've done all that, the system and form will ask you to enter application contact details. So that is the name, telephone number and email address of the person in the company that will be liaising with the VMD throughout the application process. Next, we'll ask you to provide us with some finance information. So here you can provide us with a purchase order number. Some companies use purchase order numbers and they like the VMD to include those on the invoices. So again, this field is optional. Then please provide us with the email address of where you want your invoice sent to. So before you submit your application to the VMD, you'll be given the opportunity to check your answers to make sure that you're happy with what you're sending us. So from here, it will list all the information that you've already given us, but also give you the opportunity to change that information if you want to. So before you submit the application, you simply need to now check the declaration and confirm that the information you've provided is correct at the time of submission. And once you've done that, your application will be submitted and you'll get this page where you get a reference number. Now this reference number is useful to you if you need to contact the VMD, then please quote this number. However, once the VMD has received your application, it will be processed in accordance with normal application procedures, and your application will be logged on to one of our in-house systems. Once that is done, you'll be sent a unique application number for your application, and it's this application number that you'll then need to use in all your communication with the VMD. So this particular reference number here becomes redundant once you've been given your application number, and it's your application number that you need to use when communicating with the VMD about your application. So once you've submitted your application to the VMD, you'll receive an email. This just gives you confirmation that we've received your application. It confirms what the reference number is, and also provides you with a link so you can click on that link and go in and look at the application again if you so want to. So let's recap what we've covered in this presentation. Firstly, there's a licensing homepage, and the licensing homepage is what you see when you first enter the licensing section of the service. You can see a list of all the MAs that you hold and any ATCs that you hold. It allows you to start an application from this page, but it also gives you the opportunity to see any submissions that you've sent to the VMD or any incomplete submissions. That's any online application that you've started but haven't yet finished, so it allows you to resume those applications from this page. We've also looked at different application flows. So at the moment we have online application forms for new MAs, to renew an MA and to vary an MA. And also we have the option for you to submit documentation in support of other licensing activities where an online form doesn't exist yet. So for ATC, specific batch control, if you're submitting mock-ups or company responses. We did look at the application flow for a new MA, for a renewal and for a variation, and I gave you an example of what the flow can look like, but obviously in any of these flows, depending on what you're doing and what you're sending us, the flow can be slightly different and you may be asked slightly different questions depending on the type of application you're sending us. I also made the point throughout each application flow what the difference was between a reference and an application number. So when you submit anything to the VMD, you will receive a reference number, and this is the number you should use in any communication with the VMD if you want to query something about what you've sent us. However, once you've sent us an application and the VMD has processed that application and logged it onto an in-house system, it will generate an application number. So that's a unique application number that is pertinent to each individual application, and the VMD will send that to you. Once you have received an application number, that is now the important number that you need to remember, and that is the number you need to use in any communication with the VMD throughout that application process. And of course, like with anything, there'll always be future enhancements to the service. So with the licensing service, we'll be making enhancements based on feedback and opportunities to improve upon the service. So as I said earlier on in the presentation, whilst we have online application forms for new MAs, the renewal of an MA and to vary an MA, we are looking to convert a lot of the existing forms that our stakeholders use into online forms. So for example, we currently have ATC forms, we have forms for specific batch control, for AVAs, etc. So over time we'll be hoping to create these and create online forms for these, and they'll appear in that list once that's done. If whilst you're submitting an application or creating an application to send to the VMD you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know using the online service desk. The link is on the left hand side of this slide. If your query is more in relation to the business, say procedures, etc., or you want to know about progress against an application, please contact the relevant business area. For licensing applications, please contact a member of the Licensing Administration branch at the following email address: s.response@vmd.gov.uk. Thank you.